the former girlfriend from 2010, bumps into her at a function, and in 2020, prosecution says he killed her. This was in February, the 15th of February, the day after Valentine's Day. So on the stand has been a former girlfriend. She was there when he was arrested, really hours after this happened. Now, wouldn't it be interesting if she was able to testify about some sort of physical bruising or scratches found on Mr. Pursehouse? Let's watch more of that testimony.
You said you noticed a bruise and some scratches. Do you know which eye?
I think it was his right eye. He had a bruise.
I'm sorry, is that to the best of your recollection as you sit here today?
Correct.
Did you ask him about how he got this bruise on his eye?
I did.
And what was his response?
I believe he said he cut himself shaving.
Did you find that response to be odd?
Objection calls for a irrelevant response.
All right, sustained.
Did you believe him?
Objection irrelevant.
Sustained.
So his response to you asking him about a bruise under his eye was that he cut himself shaving.
Objection asked and answered.
Well, overruled, because there were two injuries, types of injuries noted. One was scratches to his face, the other one was the eye bruise. So you can ask the question. Once you ask, we ask it again if you would, please.
Go ahead and...
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
So his response to you asking about how he received a bruise on his eye was that he cut himself shaving.
Correct.
When you say there was a bruise on his eye, did it appear to be a black eye? What kind of bruise?
It looked like a small black eye, correct.
Did he appear distraught to you when he was hanging out with you?
Well, she said appear as opposed to was he distraught all along?
No.
In any of the times that you hung out, did he ever mention running into his ex-girlfriend?
No.
Did he indicate any thoughts to you on February 15th when you were hanging out at his house that he was very depressed?
No.
Did he indicate to you that he was at all suicidal while you were hanging out with him?
No.
Okay, now it's getting interesting. Now we have not just, hey, what was his demeanor like, but other guys, it looks like he's been roughed up. So let's talk about that here. Rich Schoenstein's here, Catherine Lizardo. Catherine, it makes you wonder. This woman obviously can't answer the questions, how did that happen, because the shaving thing ain't going anywhere. But now the jury's thinking, all right, starting to make sense, and maybe he was in an altercation hours earlier.
I agree, and especially when she described what the bruising looked like. Also, the jury can use their own common sense as well as to whether a bruising could show up while you're shaving. I think Rich and you would be in a better position to answer that. I don't shave, but I doubt that a bruising that looks like a black eye happens. So I deflect that question to you, if that would be how it looks like.
I mean, Rich doesn't look like he's gotten near a razor in quite a while. I do use some of my face as a drawing board for razor injuries, but I've never had a bruise. Rich, how do you envision that happening?
Yeah, well, let me give some hints for people who are using the dating apps. I said I don't use them myself.
I think you do.
So if you meet a dude on the dating app and he blows you off for Valentine's Day, he says he's busy all week, and then you show up, he says he gave himself a black eye shaving and he is sad and distant, get out.
That's your...
Swipe left or right. I don't know which way it is, but swipe the other way.
Yes. Well, thank you, dear Abby. That's very helpful information. So, what do you think, Catherine, in terms of cross-examining this witness? I think, maybe there's some bias there. Maybe it didn't end as she might have liked. Maybe it didn't go where she wanted, this relationship.
That would be where I would go in for cross, that you were bitter in terms of him not taking you out for that Valentine's Day, and also, but of course, there's that information that she was there when he was arrested, and that is very troubling. Now, in terms of the bruising and the scratches, she did mention that he was doing some constructions at home. It would have been more plausible if he said that it was when I was doing construction, but he used the shaving as the reason for that bruising.
All right, okay. Remind me to come to you when I need an alibi for some bizarre injury. Okay, let's find out how that cross-exam went. Let's go back into court for more of this testimony.
Now, when you say you saw scratches on Gareth's face, where did you see the scratches?
I don't recall exactly. There were a couple on his neck and face, if I remember correctly.
Do you remember what side of his face they were on?
I want to say the right side of his face.
Do you remember how many you saw?
Maybe 3 or 4.
Can you describe the scratches? Were they scabbed? Were they welts? Were they red? Any way?
They were red.
They were red? Can you describe how long the scratches were?
Maybe a half inch.
Did you observe his demeanor during the arrest and transportation away from the location?
Objection, compound, and relevance.
I'll allow the question to be asked. Did you observe his demeanor?
Yes.
Okay.
How would you describe it?
Calm.
So we're thinking about those scratches here. Rich, DNA can go either way, whether they find some DNA of hers in his facial scratches or maybe under her fingernails. Would you expect to see some of that coming along, Rich?
I would think there's a possibility. I don't know if they found anything or not. And I think the cross is okay. Yeah, I can't really attack this witness on credibility. She doesn't want to be there. That's pretty
Clearly.
apparent. No one wanted to go on a dating app.
Remember that guy that I dated for a couple of times?
And she's got her text messages exposed, and the whole thing's embarrassing. So I don't think she's lying. But the question is, what does it really mean? People can have scratches. What does it really mean? And maybe if there isn't that kind of connective evidence that you're talking about, then the defense can argue that it doesn't mean anything at all.
Yeah, I do think, Catherine, they got to come up with something. Yes, we know the defense doesn't have a burden of proving anything, but if they want to tie this up for the jury, they got to come up with some reasonable explanation, I think.
They have to, because it's human nature for the jurors and just anyone to come up with a story in your head. If you don't give them a story that would benefit your client, then they will come up with something that will be negative for your client. So they have to explain where that could have happened. So questions as to where he got those scratches. And I know that they were having a hard time asking us to how he got it and explaining it further. But I think there are ways to ask that question so that she can say whether or not she believed him or not.
Yeah, and I think there was one thing, Rich, that I want to mention that was interesting about the questioning. There was a question about describing the wounds. Were they scabbed over? Were they? Well, obviously that would have been the answer that the defense wanted, because if they're scabbed over, clearly they weren't fresh enough to have come from just hours earlier. But they were described as red, like a new scratch would look.
Right. So one possibility is they're scabbed over and they're older wounds. Another possibility with those questions is maybe the witness can't describe them with enough particularity, which brings into question whether she actually knows what she's describing, and they may have been going at that with those questions.
Just to basically check her recollection and ability to really see what she thinks she saw. Let's take a break here. Coming back more on the Pursehouse case. This is a murder case out of California, a death penalty case, maybe in name only, but it is on the table. We'll be right back.